Well, good morning. My name is Josh. I'm one of the pastors here and just super excited that you are here. We're in our second week of our series, Worth the Fight. We're just talking about in life, in marriage, and family, there's things that are worth the fight and things that aren't worth the fight. Like you've been there before. You just said, you know what? This is not worth the fight, but there's certain things in life that we actually should be fighting for. And so this is for married couples. This is for parents, but this is also for the single person in the room that is maybe looking like single and ready to mingle. I don't know, or whatever. Like it's just what we're doing is we're looking at our lives, and we're looking at really today the past, and we're asking how has that informed who we are now and our future. Because there are messages that we grew up with that have ultimately shaped who we have become. So I started thinking about some of those messages the other day, and there was one that I just think is the rampant one. I talked about a year ago about how the devil can use Hobby Lobby, and I got a few emails because you weren't very happy about that. But I just talked about sometimes like devil can fool us and think if I just put it on the wall, then it'll be true in the halls of my home, and that's not necessarily true. There's nothing wrong with it, but one of the messages that I thought about growing up with, and that I still see today, is the message, live, laugh, love. Some of y'all are like, amen. Others are like, You know, the problem is sometimes it gets overused. And I found a video. Somebody else actually posted it, and I was like, that's pretty good. And, this is what happens when live, laugh, love becomes rampant in your home.
You gotta live, laugh, love. Live, laugh, love. You gotta live, laugh, love. Live, laugh, live. You gotta live, laugh, love. And live, laugh, love, and love, and laugh, and live, and love, and laugh, and love.
Yeah. So some of y'all are incredibly offended now, and some of us grew up with messages like that in our home, and we heard things like that. You should live, laugh, love, but some of us growing up, it wasn't live, laugh, love. It was cry, run, hide. And we grew up with things in our life that have hurt us, that have harmed us, that have affected us, and honestly, things that we would love to just put in the past, but ultimately today we're talking about there are some things in our life that we actually need to face. Like, how do we face our past? Because for many of us, we have to go back in order to move forward with Jesus. So facing the patterns and coping mechanisms we inherited is essential to walk in the life that Jesus promises. Now, there's some objections to facing our past. I know. There's some things that this pushback of like, listen, I want to leave the past in the past, and I don't want to deal with this anymore. Some of us would say this. We talk about facing our past. We say, I don't need to. I don't need to. I don't need to face my past. And the thing is, for some of us, if you think you have no pain, you're likely running from it or just completely unaware of it. Or maybe others of us, we say, you know what, I'm not up for it. I'm just not up for it. You don't know my past, and you're right, I don't. And I will say this, one of the hardest things, I was talking to Maya last week, who leads our worship team and plays keys a lot of Sundays, and I was talking to him, I said, man, after last Sunday we talked about dysfunction in our families, and what do we do with it? And we just said, hey, we are really the sum result of what we have experienced throughout our lives and what those that have come before us have experienced as well. And so we are a result of those things, but we also said we do not have to be bound by those things. And so we talked about that dysfunction, and I said, the hard part for me is we talk about that, and we said, okay, let's name it. Let's name the dysfunction that's in our lives, and let's begin to work through it. And it feels kind of easy for me to get up here for 30 minutes and just like unearth all that stuff in you and then be like, all right, we're going to pray for you. It's incredibly heavy understanding and knowing what that means for you. And so some of you say, listen, you don't know my past, and I'm not up for it. And I would say this gracefully, like this is a place and a space where that you can move at your own pace. That rhymed a whole lot. We need to put that on something. This is a place and a space that you can move at your own pace. Ooh, that's a bar. All right, so, but I really do mean that. I really do mean that. We want you to move at your own pace, but I also need you to understand this, that God can't correct what you are unwilling to confront. And I know for many of us, the reason why is because we're afraid of what we'll find. Like, I'm afraid of what I will find if I go back there. If I go back there in my mind, I'm afraid of what there will be, who I will find. But I think we've got to understand that unfaced patterns, they just repeat. And I know for you this morning, you woke up and you're like, you know what I want to do? I want to address the unaddressed childhood issues that I have in my life. Thanks for this. I know it's hard, and I know it's difficult. But in order to lead ourselves and our families, maybe now or in the future, in order to lead them to the place God is calling us, many of us, we've got to face our past. We've got to go back and face some things that were hard for us. And the fear is, well, I don't know what I'll find when I go back there. When I open that closet door, I don't know what I'm going to run into. And the fact is that is all of our story. That's all of our case. So this morning we're going to look at a man in the Bible. In fact, we talked about him a little bit last week, a man named Jacob in the Bible, and what his story was like, and where he went to confront his past, and in reality, what he actually ended up confronting. And so Jacob, we talked about Jacob last week. A little background about Jacob is that Jacob had a father and a mother, Isaac and Rebekah, and they had twins. They had Jacob and Esau. Jacob was the second born. Jacob came out holding the heel of Esau. And so they called him Jacob because Jacob ultimately means heel grabber in the original text. Heel grabber. If you're a Jacob in the room, yep. So it means heel grabber. Back then, though, the Hebrew definition of that also could lead to these words, supplanter or deceiver. Now, we ultimately know Jacob's story. We talked about Jacob's story last week, just so you know a little bit. Jacob would actually live a life that would just result in deception, deceiving his brother Esau, and then deceiving his father by Esau. When Esau was born, he was very hairy. He was very hairy, for lack of better words. And so as his father Isaac was getting older in age, Isaac was going to give Esau, the firstborn, his blessing that he deserved. And Jacob worked with his mom to deceive his father Isaac by putting on animal skin to make him feel like he was hairy, to deceive Isaac to actually get the blessing. And so Jacob deceives his father Isaac to get Esau's blessing. And so Esau's response to that is, I'm going to kill Jacob. Some real drama, yeah. And so, Esau literally for years and years and years and years planned to kill Jacob. And so what does Jacob do? Jacob runs. Jacob runs. And you're going to see something in Jacob's life is he is a runner. So Jacob runs away from conflict, and he actually runs for 30 years. And then God comes back to him and says, I want you to go back to the land that was promised. And so Jacob actually listens and begins to go back. So after 30 years, Jacob goes back and he finds himself in the same region as Esau. Dun, dun, dun. So Jacob sends a messenger ahead to Esau and says, hey, Esau, and actually Jacob refers to Esau as Lord. So my Lord, Esau, your servant Jacob is near, and Jacob's got a lot of stuff now. Jacob has lived a pretty prosperous life. He's got a lot of things. And so Jacob thought that maybe would soften the blow with Esau. And so here's where we pick up in this story. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 32 this morning. That's the only place we're going to be. So you can go ahead and turn there if you want to. As we set it up now, we're going to walk through this chapter. So Genesis chapter 32 verse 6 says this: after Jacob had already sent a messenger to Esau to tell him these things, the messenger returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he is coming to meet you. And Jacob's like, yeah, with 400 men. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. So he divided the people. So he's already scheming, right? He's already scheming. He divided the people who were with him in the flocks and herds and camels into two camps, thinking if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. So what's happening? Jacob is already greatly afraid and distressed. Why? Because he stole his brother's blessing 30 years ago. And he's been sitting on this guilt. He's been sitting on this life. He's been running for 30 years. And now Esau's coming at him with 400 men. And Jacob is greatly afraid and distressed. What do I do? So he begins to make plans and strategize of how he can deceive or how he can separate Esau's attack in some way to kind of save some things and ultimately himself from this. So he does this, he splits it up, and then we see that Jacob actually prays. He prays. First time we see Jacob pray. Jacob prays to God and says, God, you made these promises to my grandfather and my father, and I'm asking for you to save my life. It's pretty bold of Jacob to ask this right now. It reminds us, though, that no one is too far removed and far gone from God to actually talk to him and God listen. And so if you're here this morning and you're like, you don't know what I've done, you don't know how long, maybe you're in the 30 years of deception stage that Jacob is in, you don't know what I've gone through and what I have done, you need to know that God is still near and he will still hear and listen. So Jacob makes this prayer, and then after Jacob prays, he then strategizes again. And so he keeps sending gifts to Esau, keeps sending to try to slow him down. So here's the effort that he sent, or the things that he sent to Esau. And these were in stages. At first, he sent 200 female goats and 20 male goats. Some of y'all are like, if you send me 200 female goats and 20 male goats, I'm going to turn around. I'm good. I appreciate the gift, but it didn't work. Esau keeps coming with 400 men. So then he sends 200 ewes and 20 rams. More stuff. Just slow him down. Maybe he'll change his mind. Then he sends 30 female camels and their colts. And then he sends 40 cows and 10 bulls. I mean, this is a farm, y'all. I mean, he's getting the hookup. And then Jacob sends more gifts. He sends 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. That doesn't work. Esau's still coming. So then he sends his family ahead of them. He sends his servants and his family ahead of them in hopes that they would maybe be saved, or that Esau would get what he needed and then he would leave Jacob alone. And here's what we see after Jacob has gone through all these efforts. Verse 24, it says, Jacob was left alone. So Jacob has now sent everything ahead of him, and he's got nothing, and he's just sitting there, and he's waiting to face his past. And this is the phase and the stage that many of us would find ourselves in if we made the decision that we were going to face our past alone. You see, for Jacob thought that he was preparing to finally face Esau. Jacob spent his life believing Esau was his greatest obstacle. So every scheme, every plan, every manipulation was aimed at outmaneuvering his brother. That's what he was doing. He was saying, finally, I'm going to meet the man who is the main problem of my life, and we are going to have it out. And this is many of us, when we think about our past and facing our past, we fear what we might find because in our minds we know who or what we are going to run into. If I go back to that time when that was done, or I did this, or I felt this, I know what I'm going to face, and I'm going to be completely alone. We often identify a person or a past event or a painful wound as the problem, so we spend years. And you've done this. You've spent years planning your defense against avoiding facing this past trauma or issue. You've rehearsed confrontations over and over and over again. You know how it's going to go in 50 different ways. You've talked to yourself as you've been driving in the car of what you might say to that person or what you might share if they ever asked, hey, how do you feel about what happened? You've rehearsed the confrontations over and over and over again, or you've just been completely avoiding it altogether. But no matter what, you feel alone. You are alive, but you are alone. And the fear is that you would have to face this alone. Something happens to Jacob as he's waiting and getting ready to face his past. Verse 24 continues to go on. A man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. So he just gets jumped from behind. I don't know how this wrestling happened. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. So this is a divine moment of revelation. So Jacob's sitting there alone, and then all of a sudden he's just, boom, like spider monkeyed. I don't know how it happened. I don't know what happened, but just pounced on him, and they wrestle, and they wrestle, and they wrestle, and they wrestle, and they wrestle. And Jacob doesn't give up. And so out of nowhere, this man just touched the hip socket, and it went out of joint. Now that word touch is super incredibly important. So the first thing we know is that this man we see later on, this man is actually God. So we see this multiple times in the Old Testament where God appears in some form for a moment to reveal himself. And so Jacob wrestles with God, and as he's wrestling with God, like that seems like an unfair fight. And so they wrestle, they go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And then it said that God, the man, touched his hip, which simply it indicates his effortless, reserved power. So you ever like when you were, I remember like when I've wrestled with my kids sometimes, and there comes a moment where like I realize, okay, my son's a lot bigger than he used to be. And I'm done. I'm tired. I'm getting sore. We're done with this. And I just kind of pick him up and say, we're done. And it's that like, oh, okay, I didn't have you where I thought I had you kind of deal. Like I just need to remind you, like, okay, we're done now. Okay, this is what's happening. God has wrestled with Jacob, and now God says he just touched his hip. And so Jacob realizes in this moment, this is a divine revelation. Jacob realizes that right now, he may have thought he was wrestling with Esau. We don't know in that moment. If Esau like had come and pounced behind him or whatever, he may have thought that. But he realized in that moment, this is not Esau. This divine touch that happened, just one touch, sent my hip out of the socket. This is God. Jacob thought the main problem in his life was Esau. And suddenly it's revealed to him all of his life. He hasn't been wrestling with Esau. He's been wrestling with God. You see, sometimes God uses the very moment we fear, in this case, the meeting with Esau, to expose the deeper reality. The real struggle isn't with the past event. The real struggle is between what we want and what God wants. The question is, what's your Esau? What's the thing that you are so fearful of facing because you don't know what you will find there? And what this story tells us is when we face our past, we will not just face that event or moment. We will also face God. We will come face to face with an encounter with God. And so this is what Jacob does, is he wrestles with God. Verse 26, then he said, let me go, for the day is broken. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Now there's a whole lot of here, like this is like father issues coming back out, right? Like I want my blessing. But what does Jacob do now? He has spent his entire life resisting God, running from God, deceiving, bargaining, trying to control his destiny. But when God wounds him, Jacob no longer can fight for victory. Instead, all he can do is hold on. So he holds on for blessing. You see, transformation happens when we stop trying to win against God and hold on to him in complete surrender. Jacob had nothing left. He could not fight because he could not walk. And so he says, I'm going to hold on. Verse 27, he says, and he said to him, what is your name? So this man, God, says to Jacob, what is your name? What is your name? What is your name? I can see this conflict happening. Like, so Jacob's trying to wrestle, and he's trying to hold on for dear life. And he's like, why do you want me to say who I am? Because the man wants him to face his past. What is your name? Deceiver, supplanter, heel grabber. I'm Jacob. In that moment, God says, hey, I need you to confront who you are in your past. See, God requires Jacob to say his name, forcing him to name his reality. So confession precedes transformation. Last week we talked about, okay, what do I do with the dysfunction? We name it, but then we confess it. You see, confession comes before transformation. And so this man is wrestling with Jacob. He's made him realize that it's God. And he says, okay, who are you? What is your name? I'm deceiver, he says. Verse 28, then he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed. God renames Jacob Israel, which is he who wrestles with God, and he blesses him and ultimately blesses entire generation after generation after generation after generation. Verse 29, then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him. Verse 30, so Jacob called the name of the place where he wrestled with God, Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. Jacob limps away, and Jacob will always have a limp from this point forward. It's a sign of grace. He limps away with a new identity. He later, you should read chapter 33. He reconciles with Esau and continues God's covenant line. What we see here in this story, just in a very quick glimpse, is we see a man who was preparing to face his past and what he had done, and instead he faced God. And what does God do? It's so interesting. Why? The question is, why does he pop his hip out of the socket? What is Jacob known for doing? Running. In that moment, Jacob can no longer run. You see, for us, if we're thinking about facing our past, and I believe that we should, wrestling beats running. Another way to say it is God invites wrestling, not running. Whatever you've walked through, whatever you've done, whatever you've been through, I'm sorry, and you have to know it breaks the heart of God. But what he doesn't want you to do is run from it and forget it. He actually wants to use it and redeem it. And the only way that we can do this is if we actually wrestle. The invitation this morning is to become someone who wrestles. Become someone who doesn't run, but we wrestle. To actually get in the arena with our past and ultimately with God and wrestle with him to see how he wants to use it and how he wants to redeem and transform it. Become a wrestler. Get in the arena and face what terrifies you. The question that we have to face this morning is this: what in the past do you need to get in the arena about? What in your past do you need to get in the arena about with God? And say, here's what I'm going to do, God. I don't know how this is going to turn out, and I'm actually terrified. Because I don't know who I'm going to find. I don't know what I'm going to find. I don't know what I'm going to feel. I know what I felt in that moment, but I don't know what I'm going to feel when I get there. And say, but God, I'm going to get in the arena with you because you're faithful. I trust you. And God, I trust you're going to show up. So for some of us, we're going to get in the arena because in your life, in your family, you always felt second best. You always felt second best. For some, there's choices that you regret from a previous or past relationship, and you've just run from those things. And today, you're going to get in the arena. Some, you never felt safe at home, in your home growing up. And to relive those things will be so painful, but you never actually healed from them. And so you're still hurting. You're just running from the hurt. So you get in the arena. For some, you got a lot of stuff growing up from mom and dad, but you never got affection. You never got attention. You never heard the words, I love you. And you actually, instead of running from that, you've got to get in the arena. Others, it was betrayal, it was lies. Maybe it was something done to you, or it was something that you did. And you just said, I'll just put it in the past and I'll forget about it and I'll move on. But there's a problem with that. We're the sum results of what we've experienced. But we are not bound by them. But we have to let God redeem and transform and heal them. And the only way to do that is to face them. What in your past do you need to get in the arena about? I think for many of us is why we encourage it. We had a few people jump into it, which I love. We got emails this past week about counseling. You can go on our website, citychurch.cc/counseling. You can sign up. We'll cover your first counseling session because we believe in it so much. These are things that I know are not easy that we need to wrestle through and wrestle with. I do want you to know this, that I think counseling is an arena for transformation. I've been in counseling for 4 years and I've experienced it. It is not an affirmation party. Like if you get with a counselor and you leave feeling better about yourself every time, I don't think that's good counseling. It should feel like a fight sometimes. It should feel like you just got out of the arena because you're working through things and God is healing and God is transforming and He's moving. And sometimes it ought to tire us out because it is deep work. But again, we have to remind ourselves that God can't really heal what we won't face. There's a framework that I read that I thought was so helpful. And it sounds very simple, but at least maybe it'll put us on a starting ground, and maybe it'll make you realize, okay, after I do this, I do need some help. I do need some professional help. I do need to come along someone and walk with them through my past hurt or trauma. It sounds so trivial, but I think it's really good. It's from and author Lisa TerKeurst wrote about it. It's just 3 steps is this in your life. Collect the dots, connect the dots, and then correct the dots. So collect the dots. Write down things about your life. This is similar to what we did last week. Write down things in your life, the dysfunctions, the things that you feel in your life now. And then do the work to connect the dots to what made you and caused you to feel that way. And then we begin the journey of correcting those. We correct those. With God, wrestling with God, not running from Him, we correct them. Because here's the vision and here's the goal. I love how Jacob ends this wrestling match with God. He names the place that he wrestled with God, and here's what he says about this place. And here's what I would hope that will be said about us as we face our past is this: I have seen God face to face, and my life has been delivered. What's going to happen and what am I going to run into when I face my past? The hope and the prayer, and I believe this, is that we will see God face to face. And we will wrestle with Him, and our life will be delivered. And the commitment that we make today is this: as we walk this path, as we fight for healing and hope for our family and our future families, as we do what Jacob did. We do what Jacob did. We get near to God and we don't let go. When it's hard, when we feel like we can't walk anymore, we get near to God and we don't let go. We don't let go.